today's date is 4 March 2022, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Joseph Buche. We are here in Northern Virginia, and I am with the Americans in Wartime Experience. So, sir, we're here to talk about the flower ceremony that took place last November. If I could just get a little bit of information about you specifically
Sure.
before we get into that. So, what's your full name? Where were you born? Where'd you grow up? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, my name's Joseph Buche, Joe Buche, and I was born in the South. I grew up in Arkansas. My father served in the Navy for a while and considered a career, but decided he would rather get out. He was an electrical engineering professor at the University of Arkansas. He passed away in the early 70s, and my mom married a snowmobile executive. Not much use for that in Arkansas, so we moved to Wisconsin. That's where I went to high school and college.
Okay. And you served in the Army?
I did. I enlisted in 1980. A little less than 4 years later, I got commissioned out of the University of Wisconsin ROTC program, and then spent 30 years as an infantryman. And would have stayed longer if they'd let me, but my body was starting to break down enough. It was probably time for me to go.
Right. And you said you were commissioned. What rank did you retire
Yeah, so I retired as a colonel.
Okay.
I was fortunate enough. A lot of either the good things or the bad things that happen to you in the Army are based on timing. They're almost incidental. I was lucky enough to be a lieutenant in Germany during the Cold War. Like most lieutenants, I was full of passion and moxie, but not much context. So our first platoon position was actually just outside of Fulda. Everybody talks about the Fulda Gap, and I had no idea about it at the time. I just knew this is where 3rd Platoon was supposed to be. After that, my wife, who was also in the Army, we went to Fort Campbell, to the 101st Airborne Division. We're both lucky to get to command companies in Desert Shield, Desert Storm. Okay. And then later, I got to command a battalion in the 101st in Operation Iraqi Freedom. A little later, I was a senior officer in Afghanistan for NATO training mission Afghanistan. And in there, I got to serve as the regimental commander for the Old Guard for a couple of years, too.
Gotcha. You went to college at Wisconsin State?
University of Wisconsin.
Wisconsin.
Yeah,
okay.
You bet.
And then you graduated from there?
I did. Barely, but I did.
What kind of, other than school and ROTC, what kind of extracurricular stuff did you get into?
Well, I was a mediocre wrestler in high school, and I loved wrestling. Of course, in Arkansas at that time, in the 70s, wrestling may have even been unheard of. But in the Midwest and Wisconsin, I really enjoyed that. So that was my sport. Okay. I was big into I'll call it student politics. I was on the student council. I was class president for 3 of the years I was in high school. And if I have a claim to fame, it's that I was elected to the Columbus, Wisconsin School Board while I was still in high school. Okay. And I think I was 18 years and 10 days old at the time. So I think I was the youngest elected official in the history of the state at that time. It hasn't gotten me much, but other than just a talking point.
Right. So the Army brought you to Northern Virginia, or Metro. Is that where you live now? Is this where you call home?
We're a little north of here. We live in Columbia, Maryland,
okay.
But yeah, still in the area. You bet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How long have you lived in this area?
Well, so my family's lived here since 2005. We left Fort Campbell after battalion command, came back here, and then we moved on to Fort Myer for command of the Old Guard, and then moved off. I deployed to Afghanistan, but yeah, the family's been around this area since 2005. Okay. My wife and I moved for a couple of years down to the Tidewater area near Norfolk, and then came back. So quite a while, actually.
Right. Now, what brought you to the Old Guard? Something you wanted to do, or did the Army tell you that's where you're going?
So it was a little of both. Like I say, I'd been fortunate enough to command during Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And as I looked at where you could go in the Army to keep commanding, to be a company commander again, the Old Guard was one of the few places I could go. And I was acquainted with a guy who had gone there from Fort Campbell, and so I was lucky enough to get to go there, and I got to command a couple more times as a captain. And then, when I got selected for brigade command, the Army just decides where you go. It's a small enough list so you can figure out, well, this guy's going here because he's already pre-positioned. This guy's the only guy with mech experience, he's going there. And it came down to, I was either going to Fort Campbell or to Fort Myer, and it pretty soon became apparent after the cards started falling, going back to Fort Myer.
Right. Tell me about the Old Guard.
The Old Guard is a really interesting organization. It is the oldest active infantry regiment in the Army. It's the 3rd Infantry Regiment. A lot of people say, well, how can that be the oldest one? Early in the Army's lifetime, they renumbered the regiments based on the alpha of the commander. And it turned out that the earliest regiment, actually, the commander was 3rd in terms of alpha order. But the Old Guard has been serving in D.C. for decades now. And they secure the nation's capital and assist with national special security events. They also maintain our traditions with ceremonies and welcoming of foreign leaders and that. And then they also honor those who are fallen. So for me, it's always been, I'll say, an important role and a deeply meaningful role, particularly as the regimental commander. There were times where I was out in front of a lot of people saying farewell to President Bush, welcoming President Obama into the White House. But the most fulfilling aspect of it was the funerals. Generally, there's no crowd. There's the family, and it's very poignant and meaningful. So actually, when you're away from the crowds, when there's fewer members of the media taking your picture, there's a lot of deep meaning there for me.
Yeah. I myself spent some time in the Air Force.
Okay.
In the early 90s, and I've done, because of that, because of where I live, because of this project, spent a lot of time with a lot of different military folks.
Yeah.
And my impression of the Honor Guard, especially the Sentinels that I've had a chance to speak with, is they are some of the most squared away and dedicated troops I've ever met. Would you second that? Well,
they're certainly paid to be, and they put a lot of effort into it. The soldiers that go down to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, first of all, their company chains of command have to trust them to go to sort of maintain the credibility and reputation of their company.
Right.
And then they've got to go through some pretty significant training to qualify to be a Sentinel. To a person, I think every Sentinel I've come across, not only are they concerned about their execution at the tomb, about looking right, about their uniform being right, but they've got a feeling of the higher meaning of the tomb. The Sentinel's Creed, it's got some very interesting lines in it, some that mean a lot to me. And the one that I pay the most attention to is where, and I'm paraphrasing here, this isn't about me, it's about them. Right. It's about being a part of something broader than yourself, more meaningful than just yourself.
Right. So let's go to the flower ceremony from last year. What is your role in that?
So after I retired from the Army, I worked for several years for Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab, and then about a little over a year ago, I really retired. And one of the things that I was interested in doing was working with some nonprofits. And so I had known some of the people who founded the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier Foundation and was asked to be the executive director. Now, we're a pretty small nonprofit. You're speaking to the full-time staff, if you will.
Right.
But we've certainly got some great board members and some volunteers. As we approach the centennial of the tomb, one of the things we were very interested in doing is using that as a means to draw attention to the higher meaning of the tomb. It was a centennial, clearly, only happens once a century, so it's a unique and special event. But Richard Azero, one of the guys I work with in the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier Foundation, has a great statement. He says, watch people as they leave the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. They leave profoundly changed. I agree with that, and some of our thinking with the centennial was this was an opportunity to encourage more people to experience what several of us had the opportunity to experience the profound impact that just going to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier can have on people. So as we got closer to the centennial, I was talking to the director of the Army staff, the executive director of Army cemeteries, and the Society of the Honor Guard, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, had already suggested the potential of a flower ceremony around the Sentinel. The executive director of Army Cemeteries was kind enough to ask if we could assist with that by providing flowers. And so that was a great opportunity for us. It provided us an opportunity not just to participate and to help, but also to advertise what was going to happen. And so that's the background of how we got involved with the flower ceremony.
Yeah. You talked about people being changed when they go to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. What do you think that means to people? And why do you think it changes them? And what do you think they're expecting when they get there?
Yeah. So, again, I've been fortunate enough to be associated with the tomb for a while as, if you will, a commander of the organization that was responsible to execute those duties and to secure it. And then also away from there, too, when I visited. And at first I was looking for what the impact was on the average individual that went there. And I decided after a while it varies by individual. Old tomb guards, old sentinels talk about times where the chains were a lot closer to where the sentinels walked. And mothers of deceased soldiers standing there and whispering things to them. Of course, sentinels aren't able to react, but it's interesting to hear their stories and listen to them. So I think for those who have lost someone in a theater of war or had other perhaps harrowing experiences with respect to a loved one, I don't know if it's a sense of closure or an appreciation, or perhaps a sense that part of the Army's warrior ethos is we'll never leave a fallen comrade. And there's a great deal of symbolism there, I think, as it's exactly what we do. The Sentinel is there, rain or shine, all year long, all day and all night. I think some people are there and they come and they're just curious. We certainly make a big point about the precision of the Sentinels and their precise movements, how correctly they are adorned. Other people who I think have been in the military, a lot of us know people who either gave their lives or gave parts of their body to the nation. And so I think there's an appreciation, as you may feel, as somebody who's a veteran, for the impact that has. But it is amazing to me that even the rowdiest crowds that show up at the tomb, how their comportment changes, and at least in their countenance, how it appears to influence them deeper than just a concern that their comportment might not be appropriate, but rather an appreciation for the situation they're in and how they should behave.
Right. What kind of special challenges were there? Because the public, like you said, normally isn't that close. Now they're walking almost right up to it.
Yeah.
What kind of challenges did you guys face?
So fortunately for us, Arlington National Cemetery in the Military District of Washington actually orchestrated that component of the public flower ceremony. But I think we were some of the first people that those in line were exposed to as they came through the line to go onto the tomb. Our organization and then also the Memorial Day Flowers Foundation, both on different sides of the line, were handing out flowers to people. Some of our members were veterans. I had been associated with the tomb, and I know. I talked earlier about Richard Azero, who's a former tomb guard, was there, and so as generally the first contact people had with somebody associated with this ceremony, I found it great to listen to what the questions they had, or just the appreciation that most of those people felt about the opportunity to do something like this. Right. And there were people there. We had a senator, we had very senior military officers, senior political appointees, and frankly we had people that just happened to be in the cemetery that day came by. We had folks in work coveralls. I mean, it was truly a cross-section of America.
And not all Americans, I'm told.
No, I think that's right. We weren't checking people as they went through, and nor should we, but there were people from all over who came through there. And I don't know that there were any challenges with the individuals coming through. most of the challenges we faced were logistical, and they were things we were happy to do to make it work.
Right. Was there anything specific that you wanted to convey to people or for people to take away from this?
Well, particularly our foundation, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier Foundation, our central tenet, if you will, is to ensure that America honors those who have served and sacrificed for our nation. One of the reasons that we chose the name Tomb of the Unknown Soldier Foundation is that higher meaning of the tomb. Here, you've got 3 American soldiers who will never know who they are. They perished in anonymity, but they perished for a cause. It was a cause greater than themselves. I would hope that those who participated in the public flower ceremony, who paid attention to the Sentinel, or who, frankly, tomorrow or the next day or the next week, think about it, understand how important an ethic of service, the requirement of sacrifice is to a democratic republic. My personal belief is we don't survive without those who are willing to serve and sacrifice for a cause greater than themselves.
And it could be said that those that are there are still sacrificing.
I think that's true.
All these years later.
And they and their families. If it's a horrible thing to send a loved one off to war and have them perish while they're there. I'm fortunate. I've never had a member of my family. I had that happen to a member of my family. I certainly know those who I was comrades with or friends who gave the ultimate sacrifice. But I think we can all imagine the lack of a sense of closure when you send away a loved one and they simply don't return, as far as you know. And so I think those families still serve. I think those families still sacrifice. And certainly when I was in the Army, we said, you don't really re-enlist a soldier, you re-enlist a family. And so it's important that we don't forget the families of those who serve and sacrifice too.
You were part of not only the planning of this, but you also participated in it.
Yeah, so the participation of, it's amazing what you learn about things you don't know. We ordered 10,000 carnations for this. We did a little math to try to figure out how many people could go through, and 10,000 was about the number we ended up with. Fortunately, the executive director of the Memorial Day Flowers Foundation, who I say was their organization was also handing out flowers. He's what I call a flower professional. He knew more about flowers than I did, and so on the day before the first day, a group of great volunteers, cut the stems of 10,000 carnations so that they could fully open. I learned that there's a thing called a flower guillotine. Had no idea that existed. But the preparation was literally grinding on the hands. Then handing out flowers was a labor of love. It was neat to meet everybody, to talk to them, to answer their questions, to tell them about my personal connection with the event, with the tomb, and with the military, and then also to talk about our connection, the foundation, both foundations that were there. And then, of course, no operations complete until you clean up afterwards. And same thing, we had some great volunteers who helped us, take out of Arlington Cemetery the detritus that is left behind after something like that.
Were there any groups or individuals that stood out, or any experiences in general that stood out about those 2 days?
I would say there were a few. I'm always impressed with those who, maybe are missing an arm or a leg, who have difficulty walking, or aren't as blessed as maybe you or I am. I complain, when my knees hurt, and I think, okay, I got 2 knees. So it was touching to see folks kind of labor through the line to get up there. There were some friends of mine that came through. I was blessed to serve in the old guard with Tom Cotton, who's now senator. He was a lieutenant and Captain Cotton back when I knew him. And while I want to make clear that our foundation is apolitical, I appreciated the fact that here's a sitting senator and his family who came to lay a flower. I enjoyed the opportunity for my wife and I to go through and lay a flower. It was near the end of the 2 days, and I know there's no crying at baseball, but I'll start to shed a tear at a well-run meeting. And so as my wife and I were preparing to walk out there, and we're both retired military officers, so we wanted to do it correctly and in sequence. And she said, "So, you're going to give the commands?" I said, "Yes." And of course, when I got out there and saluted, I started to choke up. So she was trying to choke back her, a little bit of laughter at me choking up when I told her I wouldn't. But that's neat. My brother-in-law got to come by and lay a flower, and seeing him get to do it was special.
Do you think that the tomb's been here since we celebrated Sentinel 100 years now,
Yeah.
100 years plus? Do you think it's still relevant today? Is it still a necessary mission for someone to be out there 24 hours a day?
So I feel strongly that for a number of reasons, the concept that we'll never leave a fallen comrade is important. Like I say, I served 30 years as an infantryman. I can tell you at night, in the rain, on a hill, with no moon, with little sleep, when you feel isolated, maybe it's just you and one other person, you know that the rest of the team is out there, or at least you believe the rest of the team is out there. And what causes you to stay, what causes you to not become paranoid, not to run, is you trust the other members of the team that are there. So I think the symbolism in the tomb is a critical component of that. I also go back, this is something that in Tom Cotton's book, near the end, he talks about the Sergeant Major of the Army and a visiting dignitary of similar rank had gone to the tomb and laid a wreath. And on exiting, this foreign dignitary said, you treat your dead better than we treat our living. Those kinds of things where we highlight the importance of service and sacrifice, I think it's critical for the military, and as I've said, I think it's critical for our nation to understand this ethic of service and sacrifice is essential for our nation. We are not going to survive without it. So I think there's certainly a relevance there that lives to this day, and I believe will live for the next 100 years.
Did the flower ceremony, in your view, serve the purpose that was intended?
So yes, but the key question that we all need to keep in mind is not just were those 2 days successful? Because remember, we as a nation are embarked on a journey, not a destination. While that was extraordinarily meaningful, I think it was a wonderful way for America to and the world, as we've said, to express their admiration and their love and their deep feeling for what the tomb represents. The important thing is whether we continue that, whether leaving from there, whether we as a nation can coalesce around something, no matter what our beliefs are otherwise, around the identity of what it is to be an American, the fact that service and sacrifice is apolitical. And if the flower ceremony helps in that journey, I think it was a wonderful success. But we need to be careful about saying, hey, that thing we did was great, and just moving on from it. Hopefully the memories stay with us. The effect that it has continues. That the people there who are young, when their children grow up, they say, it's in 40 years you could have an opportunity to do this. Those are the things that I think will make this a success. And we don't know if it is yet. We hope it is, but we don't know yet.
Did we do this again? Do we do it in a year, 5 years, 10 years, or we wait another 100?
So I don't know. Clearly, some of the significance of it accrued from it being a once-in-a-century kind of thing. My preference, I guess, would be that we not focus on members of the public laying a flower at the tomb every year, every 5 years, every 10 years, or even every 100 years. My hope is that we think about the higher meaning of the tomb, the need for service and sacrifice, its essential nature both to our Army and to our nation. And that instead of coming to Arlington Cemetery, buying a flower and laying it on the tomb at some frequency, we do that out in America. We recognize those who have served and sacrificed. We ask ourselves if we have sufficiently served and sacrificed. If we do that, I think that will pay tenfold dividends as opposed to just repeating this ceremony, as poignant as it was.
Right. One of the reasons that we do this kind of thing is because we want to preserve your experiences because they're unique to you. Somebody, hopefully, at least somebody, in 50 or 100 years might watch this.
Yeah.
Might be doing a research project, or if the internet's still around, might be clicking through the internet and find this interview.
That's right.
What message do you want to send that person?
Yeah. So, I mean, from a personal standpoint, probably a few. I mean, I tell people I was lucky enough to get to serve in the Army for the time that I did. And, I was a light infantryman for most of that time. And there were certainly, particularly nights, but days also, where I could think of many other places I would rather have been. But on the whole, I really enjoyed the honor of getting to serve. Beyond that, with respect to the tomb and the flower ceremony, I've said it several times, but it's worth repeating. There's this saying that, hey, you're preaching the choir. Well, sometimes the choir enjoys a good sermon. Service and sacrifice is something to be respected. It's something that our nation needs in order to survive. And without it, we will perish. The great American experiment, and I'm a believer in American exceptionalism, not because you or I are necessarily genetically gifted, but because of this democratic republic that has survived this long in this way. And it has, I believe, survived because of service and sacrifice, for a commitment, something higher, greater than oneself. So that's my message to people. I hope they can, come up with something. And I'll tell you too, if you look at my extended family, it's really a family of educators. There's not many of us who have served in the military. And while I think it would be incorrect to establish an equivalency between those who have gone off to war and lost a limb or lost their lives or lost their eyesight with someone who has done a difficult job, say in education or medicine or somewhere else. I do appreciate that kind of service and that kind of sacrifice. And so we need to be careful that we don't just say, hey, there's military service and sacrifice and that's it. You're either in or out. I think there are other ways to serve. There are other ways to sacrifice for our nation. And I hope that everybody in the world does it for their nation, and particularly Americans for ours.
Is there anything else that you would like to mention or talk about that we haven't talked about? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah. So I think this is timely, and again, if somebody looks at this in 50 years, it may not be as timely. But my take right now is America is woefully divided. I personally am a believer that the Democratic Republic, part of what makes it survive is on debate, and sometimes in good meetings a little fur flies. So I am less interested in everybody agreeing. In fact, I'm probably more interested in a robust disagreement within our nation. But if we become divided, if we cannot find a set of values that are universal, that appeal to everyone, again, I don't know that our nation is going to survive. And I think the example of the tomb, the symbolism of the tomb, is something that we can all agree upon. God help us if we can't.
Right. Well, on behalf of the Americans in Wartime Experience, I want to thank you for sitting down and talking to us, sharing a little bit of your experiences.
Thank you, sir.
It's a pleasure, and thank you for your service.
Hooah.